I would actually put my money on the conflict going on for another 2 years at the least. Yeah.
Really?
Because one of Russia's biggest issues is that Russia can't stop this war. They have so many people employed right now at munitions plants. Essentially, they have no unemployment in Russia right now. Everyone's either in the army or they're working or they're supporting the war effort. And the issue is that if the war stops tomorrow, then Russia starts disbanding its military. You have a bunch of people who know how to use guns and they don't have a job.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air. I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. The people are the ones that can make the change.
How do you think the U.S. military, what you're talking about, moving pieces across the chessboard, working on logistical areas, runways, stuff like that, I would consider that to be strategic level warfare for sure. Then I look over at areas like Ukraine, where there's videos of guys throwing grenades at each other in trenches and then fighting off FPV drones, which is more at a tactical level. How much do you think the U.S. is paying attention to the warfare, the type of warfare on the ground? Because at some point, unless we go completely electronic in, unmanned, it's going to terminate potentially at people doing those things. How do you think you find a balance in that? Or where would you estimate that the U.S. is finding a balance?
So I think that the one fear I have is that we're going to look at Ukraine and we're going to assume the next war is going to look like Ukraine. And it probably won't. There will be components of it looking like Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that you see, Ukraine's using drones so extensively is that both Europe and the U.S. kind of slow-walked ammunition to Ukraine, either because they didn't want to escalate or we didn't have the shells, which is bad, right? So because of that, Ukraine went, crap, we need a way to fight the Russians, so they invested in drones. Now, if you look at something like an FPV drone, FPV drones are great. First-person view drones, which carry a small explosive. They might kill one dude, they might kill one tank, but you need to kill by the bushel, right? What does that? Yeah. Artillery. So you can manufacture an FPV drone, and then you use it, and it's lost. But if you use that same drone for ISR, for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and you call in artillery with that, that's a force multiplier. So my big fear is that the Army, I've talked to some people, and I'm actually going to an intelligence, I'm speaking at a conference in Ohio on the 5th, where I'm going to talk about the current status of drones in Ukraine. They have drone bombers now. It's called the Backfire K1. Really? It's an honest-to-God drone bomber. Jesus. It's about 10 meters in length and has a bomb bay that holds 2 mortar rounds or 16 anti-personnel rounds. It's amazing. Wow. But one of my big fears is that we're going to say, all right, well, every soldier needs a drone. Every soldier needs an FPV drone. All right. I mean, maybe if we're doing a raid, we might use FPV drones to, let's say, for hitting a prison camp, we might use those FPV drones to take out every guard tower, right, in one quick swoop, right? That might be an option. But to have every soldier with that FPV drone, I don't know if that is a force multiplier when we have artillery, right? And we theoretically have a reliable source of shells.
How long do you think it takes? Administrations shift. They could shift at least every 4 years. Sometimes they're around for 8. Policy is, not exactly like a light switch. Yeah. So, somebody comes into office, it's not like it's a whole new world we're living in. That was everybody's favorite meme the first day Trump was in office. Hey, eggs are still the same price. It's like, no shit.
It takes a while to grow a chicken to lay an egg, right?
Dude, yeah. How long do you think, though, so let's say, using your term, the handcuffs coming off, does it take to really reshape policy in an area like that, for a region of the world like that, for them to take note and change behavior?
I think with President Trump day one, when I think one of the reasons that you saw the HTS, the Tir al-Sham, take over Syria so quickly, is that my initial assessment was that these guys were going to try to grab as much land as they could before President Trump came into power, because they believed that the day President Trump came into power, that's when he was going to turn off aid to the Kurds. And so if they could grab a bunch of land now, they could then turn their forces north and hit the Kurds. And actually, as it turns out, HTS kind of reached out to the Kurds and was like, would you like to join the National Army? And it seems like they're receptive to that. Now, I've also been talking with some Alawite guys who said, like, yeah, like a splinter group of HTS has been coming through my neighborhood and killing people, which is bad. Like, don't do that. But I think in some cases it can be overnight. October surprise, when Reagan was elected, like the Iranians released the hostages the next day. They knew he wasn't going to screw around. So I think in some cases it can be almost instantaneous. I think in other cases where you need a little bit more pressure, like you look at something like China, the U.S. is trying to pivot to China. Well, we can't just take the 173rd Airborne out of Vicenza, Italy, uproot them and plop them down in the Philippines. We have to build the bases. We have to develop the relationships to build the bases. And, that could take months. That could take years. So I think it really depends on the kind of force projection you're looking for. And I see, I'm sorry, please. I see us eventually rebasing, because that's one of the reasons I believe that we're kind of being rude to NATO. It's because NATO, ever since Obama in 2014, we've said to NATO, you need to start pulling your own weight. And a lot of them didn't listen. Poland listens. France listens. UK listens. A lot of other countries didn't. Italy listened. A lot of other countries didn't listen. So
you're talking about from their requirement, their GDP.
You have to have at least 2% of your GDP in defense. Some countries listened. Some countries didn't. Poland is, my God, they're going to have the largest land army in Europe. I think they're going for 6 divisions. 6 divisions.
Wow.
In Europe, and just in Poland. And that's pretty darn impressive for a smaller country. In Poland, it's cool to be a reservist now. Like, if you're in college and you want a girlfriend, you better join the reserves, because she's probably in the reserves. And she's not going to get, it's
a good selling point.
She's not going to date you.
It's a good way to get young men. On that policy shift stuff, like you're talking about over with the Houthis, what do you think the impact is going to be in Ukraine? I mean, I am limited to what I can see on traditional media sources, the newspaper. Let's just say, though, from an outside perspective, somebody who is not incredibly well educated on the topic, there seems to be a different tact being taken, a lot more of a hard line. If you were a betting man, where would you put your money on that resolving itself, and when?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a good one. I only I guess
hypothetical money.
Hypothetical money. I would actually put my money on the conflict going on for another 2 years at the least. Yeah.
Really?
Because one of Russia's biggest issues is that Russia can't stop this war. They have so many people employed right now at munitions plants. Essentially, they have no unemployment in Russia right now. Everyone's either in the army, or they're working, or they're supporting the war effort. And the issue is that if the war stops tomorrow, then Russia starts disbanding its military. You have a bunch of people who know how to use guns, and they don't have a job. And granted, Russia's gun laws are a lot different than the U.S.'s gun laws. You can still own a firearm in Russia. A little bit harder to get the license for it, but that's never stopped a revolutionary from somehow acquiring a gun. And I think kind of the reason the administration has taken this tact is that they want this war to be over. right now, because we're going to be fighting China in 2027 or 2028. And the last thing we need is to still be dealing with Ukraine in 2027, 2028, when we're trying to deal with China. And I did a video about this. There was a famous quote from Abraham Lincoln, where Abraham Lincoln wrote Horace Greeley, this abolitionist and newspaper editor. And he said to Horace Greeley, if I could save the Union by freeing all the slaves, I would. If I could save the Union by freeing none of the slaves, I would. If I could save the Union by freeing some of the slaves and leaving others alone, I would. And I think with Ukraine, if Russia takes over Ukraine, that's fine. If Ukraine kicks Russia out, that's fine. If Russia and Ukraine go to some kind of stalemate where they're not fighting, but Russia still has some lands, or Ukraine has some lands occupied by Russia, that's fine as well. We don't care. Just stop the war, because we have to pivot over to China. Every day this war goes on is another risk that Russia's government could collapse. And if Russia's government collapses, what you have is a state that breaks up into multiple factions, maybe ethnic factions, some of which have nuclear weapons. Now, granted, the permissive action links are still controlled from Moscow to those nuclear weapons, but the last thing we want to do is be fighting China, and then we have to deal with a bunch of warlords in a collapsed Russia with nuclear weapons. We're trying to run around collecting those. So I think that's kind of the strategy here. So if honestly, if I were a betting man, I would say that it is most likely that the lines in Ukraine are going to stabilize pretty much where they are. There is a possibility that Ukraine could take back some land if they can hold on for another 2 years, it'll be a little bit better. And I say that because Russia is physically running out of armored vehicles. If you look at satellite footage of some of the Russian depots, they don't have any more MTLBs. Gone. The MTLBs are kind of like the M113 armored personnel carrier, just a cracker box that carries people. They don't have any more. They're running low on T-72s to the point where they've activated older T-62s, in some cases T-55s, but they're running out of Cold War era tanks that they can easily refurbish. And what they're left with is the stuff that's really hard to refurbish. So they can only manufacture about 50 new armored vehicles a month. And they're losing quite a few of those in Ukraine. I don't have actual numbers of how many armored vehicles they're losing, but they've gotten to the point where you see very few armored attacks anymore. You're seeing mainly drone attacks, and you're seeing infantry attacks, and you're seeing attacks on motorcycles. Armor is just too slow when dealing with drones, because you see a tank, there'll be 5-6 FPV drones going after that tank. So that's big issue.
Yeah, it's an easier target for sure. What do you think it'll be in 2 years? Do you think it'll just be a point where Russia, will they economically have to wind down their war effort over that 2 year time period? Or what do you think the difference will be?
No, I think in about 24 months, Russia just isn't going to have any more armor that they can use in the offense or the defense. They will have armor, but instead of a Russian tank company being 12 vehicles, it'll be 7 vehicles. So 2 platoons. All right. Whereas Ukraine can still get armor from the West. Right. And what I can see is that Ukraine might actually be able to take back some of their territory, mainly because they have, by this time, in 2 years, they'll have more F-16s. They might have some more Western fighters as well. Like the French just sent their Mirage 2000 to Ukraine. They only sent 5 of them, but better than nothing. And one of the advantages of the Mirage 2000, I think I call it the 5 model. They don't call it block. It's like tranche 5 or something.
That does sound like a better word than block.
It can fire the Storm Shadow or the Scalp cruise missile, which is a British-French cruise missile. So that's an additional 5 platforms that can fire that cruise missile, whereas right now only the Sioux Su-24 can fire that cruise missile. So in another 2 years, they're going to have more F-16s. The F-16 is kind of a 4-phase program here, where phase 1, they take to the sky and they establish air dominance. The reason their counterattack failed in 2023 was that they didn't have air dominance, and you had dudes in bunkers firing anti-tank missiles at guys trying to clear a minefield, and then the helicopters come. So if they can establish air dominance with Western fighters, or the F-16, maybe the Mirage, then the next step is then they start dropping JDAMs on those bunkers that are holding the anti-tank crews. And the next step after that is they can use the HARM, the high-speed anti-radiation missile, to go after specific radars. So that forces their SAMs back. And so I could envision them perhaps taking some ground back. I don't see them taking Crimea, because that would require an amphibious invasion, which is hard. It's probably one of the hardest things someone can do. Or they have to go down like one land corridor, which is very easily hit with artillery. So it might be possible they take some land back. And, after that, Russia gets to a point where they decide to come to the table with conditions that are more favorable to Ukraine. But I don't see them taking all their land back. That's going to be extremely difficult to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard me talk about Firecracker Farm and their hot salt. You probably heard other people talk about it as well. If you haven't tried it yet, let me just tell you, you're missing out on some serious flavor. Their hot salt is delicious, and it really makes pretty much anything that you put it on even more delicious. It's hot, but when you use it in moderation, it's not too hot, and the flavor that it adds enhances without overpowering. It is handmade, super premium, and comes in awesome stainless steel push-button grinders like the one I have in my hand right here. You can take them anywhere. Hot sauce, if you've had this experience, can very easily overpower other flavors and always runs out quickly when it's good. Hot salt lasts and lasts. The push grinder holds over 500 plus pumps, and when you consider the refill it comes with, it's thousands of servings, and it's a great deal and a lot cheaper than the sauce. For those of you that like flavor but hesitate because it might be too hot, you can mix it with sea salt to tone it down and still enjoy the awesome flavor. In my personal experience, you can modulate how much comes out of the dispenser. You're in total control of the amount of heat you serve yourself. So if you would like to support our show and give Alex and his family business a shot, head over to firecracker.farm and use the code Ironclad to get a 15% discount on your first order. You will be very glad that you did. Firecracker.farm. I mean, 2 years is a long period of time, but it bumps right up against that 2027, 2028.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your thoughts are that we might be in a war with China at that point. What makes you think that? Why 2027? Why 2028?
President Xi Jinping has told the People's Liberation Army to be ready by 2027, which is the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party People's Liberation Army. The People's Liberation Army is actually the army of the party. It's actually not the army of China. It's the army of the party. Xi Jinping is the president of he's the president of China. He's the president of the Communist Party, and he is the president or the chief commander-in-chief of the People's Liberation Army, which is the army of the party. So when a dictator tells you who he is, believe it. The other thing that the PLAN, People's Liberation Army Navy, has done is they've created these jack barges. There's a gentleman named H.I. Sutton. I don't know that much about Navy stuff. H.I. Sutton is a great source. Me
neither. I hate to tell you, I don't either. I spent very little time around the traditional Navy. People ask me questions about it. It's like, I don't know, man. You're going to have to find somebody else.
H.I. Sutton, he runs a website called Covert Shores. Very knowledgeable guy. And essentially, what China has done is they've created these ships that are almost like oil rig platforms with a swingable ramp. Like in those old movies from the Middle Ages where like they're trying to assault a castle and they push one of those siege towers up to the castle and they drop a ramp.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So imagine that, but floating on the water. Now, if you look at Taiwan looks like Afghanistan and Vietnam had a baby. All right. There's really only like 3 landing areas in Taiwan. There's only 3 landing beaches on the east coast of Taiwan. The rest of it is rocky with kind of a ring road. So the idea is to float these jack barges up to the ring road, drop the ramp, and then the barges have these jacks that go into the ground and kind of they stand up on these jacks like an oil rig. And then the back of these jack barges kind of flops open, and you have these ferries come in with tanks. Now, not a lot of people know this, but in China, all of the civilian ferries must be rated to carry military equipment. So if you're a ferry company and you're in the U.S., you take the Staten Island ferry, it's rated to carry cars. But in China, these ferries are rated to carry tanks because they are dual use. So the government can conscript these ferries. Maybe conscript isn't the right word, but conscript these ferries into military service, and then float these civilian ferries across the water, connect them up to the jack barge. They drop their ramp, and the tanks roll right out onto the beach or onto the ring road through these things. So the only reason China would be building these things is to use them, right? No other reason for these jack barges. So that's another clue.
Yeah.
2028, I actually believe, is more likely because that's when there's an election cycle. And, no American president, there's a window. We're talking either April or October, because those are the windows when the weather state in the Strait of Taiwan is calm enough to allow for a landing. You might be able to do it outside of that weather state. It's just harder. I'm sure you saw what happened to the Gaza Pier. What happens when you have bad weather when you have a floating pier, nothing good happens, right?
No, Mother Nature does not care, and water is more destructive than people get.
I'm a paddleboarder. I paddleboard a lot around Virginia Beach. There are some places, I call it murder water, because when the currents come together, especially when you have like a bay hitting the ocean, and you can see the different riptides going in, and how there's rivers under the ocean that are, all this stuff. You probably swam that stuff, right?
I did, and it's dangerous. You want to talk about ORM and risk management. I mean, we looked at that stuff. I live up in northwestern Montana, and we get millions of visitors in the summer, and the glacial melt comes down into these rivers. You watch people who've never been around water think they're going to cross a fast-moving river, and they're grabbed, and there's strainers in there, or they disappear, or they don't wear the right clothing or equipment. It shocks me how little people respect Mother Nature.
I've been caught in a rip before, and I got out of it. I was able to paddle sideways.
You'll never forget it though.
Dude, I don't think I've ever been that tired. And I knew all right, this is it. This is of all the ways I'm going to die. It's going to be in a freaking, now, eventually a boat would have come along. Maybe it wasn't that bad, but
I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Right. That's genuinely terrifying. You have to have that presence of mind to go all right, I need to do this, do the right thing.
So weather window. Okay. So that narrows it. 2028 election cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get into elite shape, or perhaps just make improvements to your current level of fitness, check out the Mountain Tough digital training program. You can try it for free for 14 days, and you can see the results for yourself. The app allows users to train wherever they are with minimal equipment requirements, whether you're in the gym or you're outdoors or you're at home. Users can access top-tier programming that fits into their lifestyle. The Mountain Tough app offers expertly designed progressive training plans that guide users from start to finish. These plans are tailored to build resilience, strength, and endurance over time, preventing burnout and injury. The app features self-guided and follow-along coaching videos, allowing users to be coached through every workout step by step. This helps to ensure proper form, motivation, and intensity, regardless of the user's fitness level. The Mountain Tough app delivers training programs built for the unique physical demands of mountain athletes, including hunters, tactical professionals, and outdoor adventurers. The programs themselves are designed by seasoned strength and conditioning experts, elite athletes, and military veterans. Start your 14-day free trial today and check out the results for yourself. And be sure to use the offer code CHANGEAGENTS, and I'm looking at it as one word, at sign-up, and you can get 40% off your annual subscription. Remember, use the offer code CHANGEAGENTS at checkout. If you were to canvass most Americans, what do you think they would say? Russia or China? Which one do you think they would say is the bigger threat?
I think most Americans might say China. And I say that because people have already seen how China behaved during COVID, where you couldn't get a straight answer out of them, right? They were very tyrannical. Their people, welding them inside of their buildings and stuff like that. If that's the way China behaves, then it kind of tells you two things. It tells you that they don't care that much about their population in general, right? Or maybe, we just have so many people, who cares, right? Like if 1% of a billion die, how many people do you have left? You still have a billion.
Yeah.
Right? Like if 1%, so you still have a heck of a lot of people. So I think a lot of people look at China as a threat, especially since, China, they bought land near U.S. air bases, which, like, why the hell are we allowing them to do that, right? And, people talk about Russian influence of people on the right wing. China has influenced environmentalists on the left wing. If you live in Montana, are there any mines where you live?
Yep. Oh, the mining industry has drastically been shut down. Probably the closest mine would be in Butte, which was a mining town. I don't know how active it is.
So let's say you're some dude in Montana and someone discovers rare earth in the ground, lithium, right? Lithium is essential for battery production, for electric batteries, right? And you might recognize, you're a proud American, you might recognize like, hey, I want to buy American and all that, but I also don't want these big heavy trucks rumbling through my town. I don't want single men working in man camps hanging out at the bars in my town, carrying on. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to start a grassroots organization. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight this mine coming to my town. Well, if you're Chinese and you see some guy start a grassroots organization in Montana to prevent a mine from coming to his town, it's within your strategic interest to make sure the United States does not mine its own lithium. So if you write a check for $25,000 to this guy in Montana and hand it to him and say, hey, here, I want to make a donation to your grassroots organization, what's he really going to say? He's going to say thank you. He's going to say thank you. That's how China can influence people on the left, environmentalists who don't want us mining our own soil. I like clean air. I like clean water. Don't get me wrong. I think those things are great. But we also need to look at foreign influence when it comes to how we push, take stuff out of the ground. And I assume mining is cleaner now. I don't know enough about mining to really have an opinion on that. But I would certainly assume it's not like, the 1800s or something where, guys cave-ins and stuff.
So,
I hope not.
Yeah.
Sure, there's more safety involved. Right.
Again, I would hope so. I hope that, the old canary in the coal mine, I hope they have better technology.
Canary, right? Yeah, right.
What do you think it looks like a conflict between the U.S. and China, 2027, 2028? What do you think that looks like?
It looks mainly naval. You're going to have ships launching missiles at each other from beyond the horizon. You're going to have the Air Force going from airfield to airfield in the Pacific, these tiny little airfields, taking off, rearming, getting back up into the fight. You're probably going to see us run out of missiles within about 30 days. That's very highly likely. And you want to talk about Winchester. I mean, ships will go Winchester within the first engagement, right? We also have to prepare for casualties. There's 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier, and we need to prepare for the fact that, aircraft carriers are big and they're designed not to sink. And at the end of the day, a hypersonic missile is really only carrying a 1,000-pound warhead, right? So it doesn't matter if a missile going Mach 2 hits you, or really a hypersonic missile has to slow down in the terminal phase anyway, because if it's going Mach 5, it has that plasma bubble in the nose, and it can't actually see anything. It has to slow down for its radar or thermal sensors to actually get a picture of what it has to hit, because ships move, right?
Yeah.
And we know how to shoot down supersonic missiles. But if they throw enough missiles at us, enough can get through, that you're going to see 200 people die on the ship, right? You're going to see an actual... When was the last ship that actually sunk? It's probably World War II,
Man.
right? Even the Cole.
I would guess it would be World War II.
The USS Cole. Those guys, they had 13, 17 casualties? And those guys...
It might have been 18.
Fought like hell to save that ship.
Yeah, which is back in service.
Mm-hmm.
It got reconditioned, repurposed. It got put on a barge, I think, brought back to the U.S. And that was a direct impact, obviously, of the explosives on the side. Yeah, they're hard to sink, but I mean, man, you put enough holes in these things, physics is
You're
physics.
absolutely correct. And you'd also be combat ineffective, right? Like if it hits your radar or something. I don't know how long it takes to fix that, whether you got to get Lockheed Martin to come out and replace parts and stuff like that. I don't know how many parts they have. And I also know they can't reload the VLS tubes from the sea. I think we used to have these destroyer tenders, which had like a crane that can... I can't even imagine what that was like. You're on the sea and going up and down, and you're trying to put this Pringles can inside a tube, as the ships are moving in different directions. I can't even imagine that. But back in the old days when we used to have the launchers, I can't remember the darn name, the nomenclature, Mark something, where they had a magazine, right? And inside this rotating magazine, you could actually put the missiles on the ship, bring them down inside the magazine, put them in the magazine, and then they would go up on the launcher and turn and fire, and we would go vertical again and turn and fire. They took all those away for VLS, because the vertical launch tubes, because you could fire faster, but the disadvantage is it's a lot harder to reload at sea. So one of the things I could see is that ships run out of missiles in their first engagement, and that's bad, right?
Yeah.
I think another thing you're going to see is you're going to see information warfare. Right now, just a couple of last year, the MV Cape Orlando, which is a Navy ready reserve ship. So last year there was this group. It was called like ACAC or something. It was this Arab Action Coalition. And they told these kids, go down to the Port of Oakland, glue yourself to the side of the MV Cape Orlando, because it's about to leave for Gaza with weapons on it. And all these blue-haired idiots went down to Port of Oakland, broke in, protested. Some of them glued themselves to the side of the ship, which prevented the MV Cape Orlando from leaving. Now, I don't know if any of these people looked at a map, because if you're going to Israel, you would leave from the East Coast, not the West Coast. But, okay. So critical thinking isn't their strong point here. But the fact is that what I believe was Iranian agents funding this pro-Palestinian, really pro-Hamas organization, they were able to have kinetic effects on target. They were able to use information warfare as a kinetic effector by getting American citizens to believe it was a good idea to glue themselves to the side of a Navy ship. So I guarantee you, when the war in Taiwan kicks off, we're going to have TikTokers and we're going to have influencers saying Taiwan is Chinese. America just wants Taiwan for its resources. It's a capitalist, imperialist, colonialist project. Go stand in front of an army convoy. Go glue yourself to the side of, go break into Coronado, glue yourself to the side of a ship. Break into whatever, Kings Bay, glue yourself to the submarine to prevent, the people of Taiwan from being rightfully reunited. So we're going to see information warfare from kids who probably can't even find Taiwan on a map. That's a third thing that's coming. I've often said TikTok is an information. It's an information weapon. TikTok is a weapon of war that is designed to use a kinetic effector against selected targets.
We don't just do the filmmaking. We do everything. We've taken a case study of over 30 projects that we've done over the past 15 years, and we put together what we believe is the most effective and efficient content funnel for brands. They need content on a daily basis. They need to be talking to authentic end users. We want your team to bring its most challenging problems and allow us and our team to apply our proven methods to your brand to take it to another level.
If you were king for a day, or they put you in a role where you could, bad metaphor, I guess. If you were put in a position where you could strategically control the preparation of the United States. Today, you're going in there like, Ryan, we need your help. You can throw whatever levers you need to, but you have to deal with what's going on in Ukraine. Help us navigate our way out of that. Help us navigate our way out of Iran. But how do you prep for a potential war against China? What would you change, and what steps would you take?
So the first thing I would do, believe it or not, is allow people to have beards again. And you might say, like, what? That doesn't make any sense. How does that make us more lethal? Well, it doesn't make us less lethal, number one. And number two, there's, I think, 30% of African-American men get the razor bumps, and we make them go to the medics. I don't know what it's like in the Navy. We make them go to the medics, get a shaving chit.
Same.
And it lasts 2 weeks,
Same.
and you got to go back, another shaving chit or no shave chit. So one of the big issues with recruiting, it's not just recruiting, it's retention. How do we get people to stay in, right? And so one easy win right away is to allow people to grow beards. And that just allows our force to grow, right? Because there are some people who leave because, darn it, shaving hurts me and I don't want to stay in. So and you know what? If we have to enter a chemical environment, guess what? You're going to shave. But
and you can have a beard and still be professional. It's not like you're saying have Genghis Khan.
I mean, we'll work that out, right?
It
has to be 1/4 of an inch, or they'll come up with a standard, right? So that's probably the one thing I would do. Is the beard thing. The next thing I would do is I would look at how we can use commercial off-the-shelf solutions to augment our Navy. So we're at a point where we're building 1.5 destroyers a year. So by 2027, 2028, we're going to have 3 new destroyers.
Or potentially 4.5.
Yeah. I don't know what you do with that half a destroyer. I personally don't understand why we're decommissioning the Ticonderoga class cruisers. I don't know if that's like a cost thing, or that's just too expensive to upgrade, or maybe the Arleigh Burke can do everything the Ticonderoga can do. I don't really know. I don't know enough about the Navy to comment on that, but I do know we need more ships. So we've already containerized the SM-2, I believe the SM-6, and the Tomahawk. So we can put them in shipping containers and go vertical, launch them. So one of the things I would do is I would explore simple ways of putting shipping containers on perhaps merchant ships or unmanned ships that we can build rapidly and have these things follow an Arleigh Burke class destroyer. And if you need extra ammunition or different kinds of weapons, the Aegis system talks with that unmanned ship, and it opens up the containers and it fires the weapons it needs to fire. So that might be another thing I would do. The third thing I would do is I would see if we could fund the Navy railgun program again. And, the Navy is a missile Navy, right? But these railgun shots, I think they only cost like $100, something like that. Well,
really?
The tech is expensive.
Yeah, the tech is wildly
expensive. But the
actual
round, it's fairly small. It's just like it's a slug. It's a slug of metal. It doesn't cost all that much money, but you're accelerating it so fast It does a lot of kinetic damage. You're going like Mach 10, something like that. So that would certainly be another option, because the whole idea here is you want to destroy the arrows while they're in the quiver, right? So if we can hit some of these Chinese missile launchers with a gun that can fire 200 miles, that's certainly better than waiting for those missiles to launch. Kill the archer, not the arrow, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is it possible to fire a 109 howitzer, 155 millimeter howitzer? Can we fire that off a Navy ship? I don't know if anybody's tried that. We fired HIMARS off of Navy ships before. You strapped a HIMARS to the deck of a ship, launched it. Well,
why couldn't you do this? Yeah, I think you could do the same thing with artillery.
I don't know enough about artillery, but it might be an option, because right now the Zumwalt class destroyers, they have that stealthy gun that never really worked, right? They never got the ammunition for it. They never really worked on the gun. Could we actually take Army artillery, Marine Corps artillery, put it on the deck of the Zumwalt and actually use that? Or could we take Army artillery, strap it to the deck of one of these unmanned ships and use that as a gun platform? So that's another thing that I would consider. And another thing would be actually talk with Korea and Japan and see if they could just sell us some of their ships. Just get something quick, right? Get a Chinese destroyer, a Chinese frigate, a Korean destroyer, a Korean frigate. We might have to rip out some of the electronics and put our own stuff in, but that might be a faster option than trying to build stuff ourselves. So I think I've given you 6 things that I would do if I was put in charge of things.
Yeah.
But beards are probably the most.
How would you unwind?
Sorry, go ahead.
How would you unwind U.S. involvement from Ukraine?
That's a tough one. I think the way I would unwind U.S. involvement from Ukraine would be to. Boy, that's a really difficult one, because I don't necessarily think we should necessarily be uninvolved, but I would probably do it by allowing the Europeans to use any American tech that's in their weapons to send over to Ukraine. So I would say, look, you're not getting any more American weapons, but one of the restrictions that we have with a lot of foreign weapon systems is that if there's an American piece of tech inside that weapon system, you have to ask us before you use it. So probably the best way of doing it would be to say, Europe, this is your problem from now on. We're not going to give Ukraine any more weapons, but if you have weapons with American tech, you are free to give them to Ukraine, but we're out of here. And from that, I would probably leave one armored brigade in Poland or Romania, remove the rotational brigades, 101st rotation, 10th Mountain rotation, they come back home. Vincenzo Brigade, you send them to Philippines. So that's probably how I would do it, is just say, we're not doing this anymore, but whatever weapon you want to give them, knock yourself out. This isn't our problem.
It's a complicated world. Yeah. There's no easy solutions to any of those the problems that I posed to you.
You're right.
I completely blasted over the time I had scheduled with you. I want to be respectful of your time.
Appreciate it.
What, yeah, of course. What do you want to leave people with? What do you want to leave the listener with? And maybe that's where they could go to get less biased information. I don't know what they should think about, what they see on TV. What do you recommend for people who, like myself at this point, I mean, I'm limited to what I consume, which I have a choice in that. I can modulate the consumption sources. But what do you recommend to the average person that doesn't necessarily understand deeply what's going on in Ukraine, who understands that China is a risk but doesn't really know where to pay attention?
What I would say is to put down your phone and start reading. And I don't just mean read about weapon systems, but one of the reasons that information warfare works is that we are all highly specialized individuals. I think it was Robert Heinlein, the guy who wrote Starship Troopers, said, like, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan a war, build a house, gut a chicken. Specialization is for insects. But the average person, 150 years ago, the average person could build a house, They could dress a chicken. They could plant crops. So the average person 150 years ago was a generalist, and today we're hyper specialized. I met a woman a couple of weeks ago who she lives in upstate New York, and she's a hunter. And she asked me, like, "Hey, you ever gone hunting?" I'm like, "Hunting? To me, hunting is going to Wegmans, right?" Like she's a hunting guide in New York. That's her specialization. But then she called me and asked for help with her website. Well, I know that, right? Like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, we're in this hyper specialized society where you have people like marketing managers, right? Like, the world didn't have marketing managers 200 years ago, right? Or maybe you did. I don't know. Yeah. People say prostitution is the world's oldest profession, but it was probably marketing, because the first prostitute wasn't a prostitute until she actually advertised her wares, right? So maybe marketing is the world's oldest profession. But you get the idea that today, you know, if I said, like, what is my job? I'm an influencer, right? I'm an intelligence community influencer. 10 years ago, that job didn't exist, right? And when you think about it, in a lot of ways, it's not a very useful job. If there was a nuclear war, would you rather be stuck in a bunker with a carpenter or an influencer?
I'm going carpenter. Unless it's a carpenter influencer.
But because we're all so hyper specialized, we can easily be fooled by misinformation. So the one piece of advice I would give people is to start reading books about every topic possible. Because when I detect misinformation online, a lot of times it's because I go, oh, wait, I read a book 10 years ago that talked about that very subject, and actually this is the reason for this. So yeah, I would suggest, if I would leave one thing to people, it would be to start reading. I mean, it's so easy. You got audiobooks now. You have plenty of audiobooks. And if you do want to read a nonfiction book, I have my novel, The Wind Machine, which is available on Amazon and on Audible. And I'm sorry, Marine Corps, now I can't sign your audiobook.
Perfect. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate your time and your insight, man. And travel safe, and hopefully you get the contract.
Thank you so much, Andy. I really enjoyed this time.
For the past 15 years, we've been known as the turnkey branded content company, right? That means that we take brand and content to the next level. So if you're Garmin and you want us to shoot your new watch at the side of a cliff in the middle of Colorado, we source the location, we get the permits, we find the talent, we get the side-by-sides. We make everything happen for a world-class piece of branded content. And that's really where we've kind of cut our teeth. And about 5 years ago, we launched Ironclad Originals as the second part of Ironclad. So you've got the branded content on one side, and you've got Ironclad Originals. And what Ironclad Originals is, intellectual properties by way of franchises that can start as a podcast, build an audience, and develop into a film or series that can be licensed or purchased by a major streaming platform. So to date, we've launched 8 Ironclad Originals. Every one of them has topped the charts on Spotify and Apple and have grown to today over 5 million downloads a month. We're doing partnerships with Warner Brothers, major sporting networks, and many, many other brands to bring their product to our audience by way of our podcast. Now, you may have seen some of our podcasts with Andy Stumpf, Vincent Vargas, Dom Rosso. We're launching 4 more this year. So these Ironclad Originals are going to continue to evolve, continue to grow, and by the end of this year, our target is to have 10 million unique audience members on the Ironclad Original platform. Now, these two sides of Ironclad are really yin and yang to one another, and you can come in on either side of that. One note is, the branded content and the original content has come together for one more unique offering called a brand podcast. We've taken all of our expertise on the Ironclad Original side, mixed with the service-based business of the branded content, and now we're providing branded podcasts. That's a turnkey podcast that we can launch from 0 to full scale within 60 days. And we'll do 52 weeks of unique content where we build the studio, build the brand, book the guest, edit the shows, post the shows, engineer the shows, take everything that makes an Ironclad Original unique, apply it to a brand and build owned content for our brand partners that can take a brand to a whole nother level. You know, as we close this out, I just want you to think, this is something that you should be doing, whether it's with or without Ironclad. We truly believe that you should be creating brand podcasts. We truly believe you need the best branded content in the world. We truly believe you need a partner that can tell your story at an elite level. Okay, so this is something that you need to be doing with or without Ironclad. But one thing about Ironclad is that we are drinking our own Kool-Aid. We believe in this so much, we're investing in originals. We are testing the waters. We have the connections happening on this side of the house. We're proven and tested on the brand side. And we promise that if you come to us, we will bring all those resources together and bring them to you. And we will be an extension to your team to make you operate at an elite level. So those are the things that we're offering here at Ironclad. We're so excited. Thank you so much for all your support. We love you all.